I loved listening to this album and
Thank you.
reading about the creative process about it, because this quote you had about turning off the judgmental switch in your brain to kind of, play music like a kid and, get back to that element. How hard was it to actually turn that off and keep it off during the whole process? Because there's post-production as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a muscle that gets stronger, I think, as you start to um as the days start to pass and your mind starts to shift into that mindset. I think it really helps. It's like visualizing something ahead of you. Instead of visualizing negative, you're visualizing that positive. So I mean, even our producer Simon Felice, I think, sort of not so subtly encouraged us to believe in ourselves. He had a picture of Liam and Noel Gallagher from Oasis up on the wall as one of the only things we could look at every day. It was like that and the word free. So I think he sensed in us a need to sort of shed some of the inner critic and just act as if you know what you're doing.
Well, what was it then? Was there a song that kind of started this creative movement for you to do it this way?
Yeah, and I mean, in the studio itself, it was Brightside, the title track. So we did that in a single day, which, I mean, people probably think that every song is like the Beatles, you just do it and it's like, that's just, they're geniuses. We are just mere mortals. So we usually take 3, 4, 5 days to finish a song, if not longer. So for us, a day is saying something. It meant that we made decisions and had closure really quickly, when in the past it would have been like, that seems pretty good. Like, let's see how we feel about it in a few days. And so it was a bright side. We to do that in a single day, and then I remember going home and then meeting up with a few people from the studio that day and having some drinks, and we listened to it and we looked at the play count the next day, and we had listened to it like, I think it was like 20 something times. Like we played it and then we'd say, play that again, play that again. And it was just this absurd fascination, and we were enamored with this thing that we had just been a part of. And I think that was brand new, that feeling of wanting to listen to your own music and not just being relieved like it's done, but being like, put that on again. That just lifted me up.
I was stranded in the bed. You were listening to the dark side of the moon. I could barely see your eyes.
But I laugh when you say mere mortals, because you're like, oh, a day, 5 days. I listened to Never Really Mine. I don't think I could create that song in a lifetime if I sat down. I love the ride that you take the listeners on for this. Like the hey, don't you fade away, don't you fade away, to like the guitar. There's a bit of grunge sound for a moment. What was the feeling making this song? I clearly like it.
Yeah, thank you. That was like our tour manager Sarah and our real good friend who does the filming. He's the fly on the wall. That they got noise complaints from the neighbors because they were playing that off of his video camera. We wouldn't give him a version, so he was just blasting it in their rental house at night, and they got complaints. So that was their favorite. But I feel like we approached that song like very humbly. I think we thought it was just going to be guitar and vocals. And Jer had gotten his COVID shot, his second shot, and he couldn't come in that day because he just felt terrible. And so we just recorded, did the vocals, did the guitar, and he came in the next day and he said, "This sounds great. Let me try something on drums." And we're like, "Yeah, good luck. Like, this song's done." And then he starts wailing away, and it sounds like Dave Grohl when he's 15, and sound like Jer as a young, just innocent, playing with so much heart and kind of abandoned. And then we had Cindy Mizell, who sang with Bruce Springsteen, the Stones, and so many other, household names. And she drove up from Jersey and sang on the record, and she couldn't have been more fun to record with. So yeah, it was one of those songs that I think we all thought, this is part of the album, and then it became quickly like a highlight for us, and which led to noise complaints, but it was like definitely a highlight.
But I felt a lot of optimism, a feeling of optimism after listening to this album. I don't know if that was the vibe, because do you think that was all influenced by how you took this creative process to the album too?
Yeah, it was a combination probably of like how we recorded it and the joy within that room, making something on the fly instead of tediously going over it 100 times and then trying to recreate it months later, and it becomes so rehearsed. This was just no dress rehearsal, just right into it, almost like improv. And that was part of it. I think we're probably saying the same thing when you say optimism, but I think about it more like hope, because I think hope, sort of fights against what they know exists, what it knows exists. It's not saying this other thing doesn't exist and these dangers and the sadness isn't present, but it's like a decision you make, and it's like a willful thing to be like, I hope. And so for me, the album feels kind of willfully hopeful, but also like instinctually, like I think a lot of us are way more optimistic or hopeful than we sort of give our wiring or our temperament credit for. Like we're good to each other. You know what I mean? Social media would lead you to believe we're not, but we are really generally a kind people. It's just when there's an outsider or something like that, we can really block people and cut people off. But having toured the country and in really humble ways, like sleeping on people's floors and couches, you get to see sides of people that you probably would never sit at a table with, and they're opening up to you, and they're opening their homes up, and maybe you don't agree with everything that suddenly now that's supposed to mean that you can never get along. And I think that to me resonates with like who we are, and that's part of the record too, is like there's a better side of us, but it's way more in vogue to be ironic and to be guarded and to be sarcastic and cynical. And I think, growing up around like Bruce Springsteen, he was always like, we can do this. And I think maybe I didn't realize it, but that's just how I grew up, and that's what normal was to me. And I think that this album kind of, I hope, carries that torch forward of that feeling without being preachy. It's just like, it's acknowledging sadness and it's acknowledging pain. In the face of that though, it's saying, I still choose to hope.
You wanna be the only son we love.
We have a Canadian friend in Tyson Barrie and his wife Emma, hockey player. He plays for the Oilers right now, but we followed him since he played for the Avs in Colorado. And we're always joking, like, if you see any land out there, let us know. We're interested. So we'll see.
I love that you said Tyson Barrie, because former Toronto Maple Leaf. We're in Toronto.
Yep.
So still loved here. And I remember when the concert was here, you guys like did the jersey thing.
Yeah.
And on like the Christmas track, their family is. Has there been any full discussion of a duet with him?
Yeah, I mean, other than that, he can't sing at all. I mean, we're gonna make it work. He's good at a lot of things, but we just had him shout on the track, so.
I didn't know that. Okay, so shouting is his level of where that would be at. Okay.
Yeah, leave the crooning to the pros, and then he could shout though. He chirps on the ice.
He's really good at chirps. I will give that. If you ever need that for an album, just throw him in there. But Jimmy Buckets, Jimmy Butler, come on, giving you a shout out. I almost fell out of my chair reading that.
I mean, that's wild.
Like that, I
totally crazy. Yeah, that's next level. I grew up wanting to be a basketball player delusionally, and so I always joke that like all the NBA arenas that we're playing, I'm like, see, I made it one way or another. I made it to this court. But I had no chance. And that guy is Jimmy Butler is so fun to watch. And also during the pandemic, watching him make coffee drinks for all of the players and like having his own coffee stand. And he emerged as such a leader and an amazing like kind of mentor for the younger guys while still playing at the highest level. So I was just like totally caught off guard when my friend sent me that. And I was like, what? Jimmy Buckets. So yeah, felt lucky.